So, good evening, fellow Toastmasters and most welcome guests. I am going to be talking to you tonight about moments of truth. Now, looking at this group, I know many of you from my long history with Toastmasters, and I know that most of you can probably recite all the moments of truth by heart. So, the way that I want you to think of this presentation tonight is a reminder of what those things are that are core to being a good Toastmasters club and to being good Toastmasters members. And I want to persuade you to remember to include these things in your meeting here at Showtime as you go forward in order to have better and more productive meetings. So, as a reminder, Moments of Truth is an episode where a person comes in contact with any aspect of the Toastmasters experience and forms an impression of a club's quality and its service. The key word that I want you to hone in that definition is service. For those of you that don't know me, I actually come from a services background, not public service, but consulting services and other types of business services. Toastmasters is a services organization, meaning that we are providing the service of public speaking and leadership into our communities. We are as much providing a service to our members as McDonald's or even like a consulting firm. So when we think about services, I want to think about moments of truth of being those things that we like to call in my line of business services encounters or services touch points. And it's those little tiny bits, it's those little tiny interactions that you have with potential members, potential guests, former members, current members. It's those little things that make Toastmasters so special and those little encounters that make Toastmasters such a wonderful organization. Toastmasters calls them moments of truth, but I like to think of them as being just like a service encounter or some type of interaction with the people who are looking for our help for our services as Toastmasters members. So there's 6 moments of truth, and I'm just going to read over them briefly. Again, I know most of you probably know these things by heart, but the 6 moments of truth are first impressions, membership orientation, fellowship, variety, and communication, program planning and meeting organization, membership strength, and achievement recognition. I'm going to talk about each one of these in turn and just go over some examples of the different moments of truth and some stories from some of the things that I've seen in my background that make Toastmasters so special to me. First impressions. Some of the individuals that are on this call tonight were in my last club, Leaders Plus Toastmasters. I'm going to tell you a little secret that they may or may not know. Leaders Plus Toastmasters was not the first club that I joined when I first moved to Arizona. I actually joined another club, which I'm not going to name. I joined the club, and the first impression that I got, I was not impressed with that club at all. I ended up joining that club because I was a believer in the Toastmasters program. I had been a member of Toastmasters for about 5 years at that point, and I wanted to continue on my journey. But when I joined, I immediately started looking for other Toastmasters clubs because I knew that I didn't want to be a member of that club. They had made a very poor impression on me. Now, this was a few years ago, and I don't exactly remember all the details, but it wasn't a good environment, and I knew that it was an environment that I wouldn't be successful in. And that's how I actually ended up finding Leaders Plus Toastmasters and ended up becoming a meeting because I met individuals like Marilyn, I met individuals like Trish, I met individuals like Nancy Starr Cassidy, and they really impressed me with the way that Leaders Plus Toastmasters was ran, and I knew that I could be a successful member there. It's little bitty things, greeting guests, making them feel welcome, having them sign guest books, reaching out, making sure they understand what the meetings are about. Many people who walk into Toastmasters have no idea what these meetings, how they flow. So the little things make a difference. And I can tell you, even from my perspective of being an experienced Toastmaster, I left my first club ever because of the first impressions. And that's how I became a member of Leaders Plus Toastmasters. Membership orientation. I have had the pleasure of being a part of the most complex membership orientation that you could possibly imagine within the United States. Not Toastmasters. It is called Basic Military Training. When I joined the Air Force, I went through a 6-week boot camp. Now, the boot camp really, its purpose is to orient the members to a new way of life, to orient them to the new language, the new lifestyle, so that the military members can adapt to this new environment. Also, to make sure that they're ready and that they have good expectations about what's going to happen. Just like the military, it's extremely important for us as Toastmasters clubs, as Toastmaster officers, and as Toastmaster leaders to make sure that we're orientating members whenever they come into a club. I can tell you just from personal experience, when I've talked to members who have came in, it can be very disorienting. I mentioned my last club, Leaders Plus Toastmasters. I left Leaders Plus. I took a break from Toastmasters around 2014, 2015. That was prior to when they ran. That was prior to when Pathways was introduced. I can tell you, even as an experienced Toastmaster who knows a lot of the lingo, coming back in post Pathways, I'm lost with a lot of stuff, and I'm still trying to learn the different terminology, the different lingo, how things work. And I know that for new members, that can be even more disorienting. So membership orientation, making sure that members have mentors, new members have mentors, their speaking roles assigned. All these things are invaluable for making sure that members have a good club experience. Fellowship, variety, and communication. I have to make a little confession. I never really understood this moments of truth well until I got to my current club, which is Soft Talkers Toastmasters. Who here knows Ashley Coleman? She's a force in the district. I see some heads shaking. She's around. Bobby, if you haven't met her, you'll meet her at some point. You'll meet her at some point in time. So Ashley is the VP of Education for Soft Talkers Toastmasters. One of the things that she does is she sets up events outside of the club. So just like Showtime Toastmasters, we only meet twice a month and we end up having an extra 5th week once in a while. Ashley will actually schedule events at, for example, the last one was putt-putt golf. The one before that was going to a restaurant. I can tell you from personal experience, doing some of these quote unquote team building things has been an eye-opener for me, and it has made me feel much more connected with my fellow Toastmasters members, especially running around putting the little golf ball for an hour or two. That was quite fun. Think of ways within Showtime to create fellowship and to create that connection between the different members. There's lots of different ways to do it. You don't necessarily have to do outside events, especially since Showtime is virtual, but even like making sure that somebody's going up for the district events, like the speech competitions, or participating in some of the different things at the district level. There's lots of different ways that clubs like Showtime can be involved and to make sure that there's those connections between the members and to build those stronger connections outside of the club meeting. Program planning and meeting orientation. How many times has your company or your employer called you to a meeting? You have no idea what the point of the meeting is. what you're going to talk about, who's running it, who's supposed to be in charge. We have all been through that experience. I can see those shaking heads. We want to make sure as Toastmasters members and as officers and as a club, we don't want the guests and our members to share in that same type of experience because it can be extremely frustrating, even within companies where you've been for a while. Just imagine now with Toastmasters being a volunteer organization, that can be detrimental and that can have a huge impact on the quality of the club meetings. So we want to make sure that we're scheduling things, that we're doing things the right way, that we have the agenda, that people are checking in. Those are the moments of truth that make club meetings successful. Membership strength. I'll tell you another little secret. The reason that I decided to come back into Toastmasters when I did was because I started hearing things about how Toastmasters was struggling with membership post-COVID. Even though I had taken a break for Toastmasters, I have always been a fan of the organization. I've always loved Toastmasters. It's always been my plan to come back. I know that many, many clubs, not just Toastmasters, many clubs within the broader community that are volunteer have just been decimated with some of the membership post-COVID. And I know that it's a challenge for a lot of different clubs. That being said, I know that there's opportunities out there to actually build membership. And the reason that I say that is my company, Insight, brought in over the summer 60 interns. Those interns are having gone through college during the Zoom time, having started with some of their employees with other internships while doing the Zoom. They are desperate for in-person communication, even within the younger demographic. I've talked to many other people, many other professionals, many other individuals that I've talked to Toastmasters about who really want to connect with other individuals. And I know that that need is out there within the community because I talk to people about it. So there are ways to capitalize on building the membership. And I realize for like a virtual club, sometimes that can be a little bit more challenging, but I want to encourage you to think of some creative and unique ways. Some of the things that we had done in the past, like at Leaders Plus Toastmasters, is doing things like Meetup and doing Facebook advertising. There's always ways to bring in new members and to keep that membership strength up if the meetings are fun, if they're creative, if everybody is having a good time. Achievement recognition. I am a little weird. And I think that most of you are probably a little weird too, because we spend an inordinate amount of time preparing presentations like this, for which we receive absolutely no payment for, conducting the club meetings and being volunteers within our community. Now, even though we don't receive payment in the monetary sense, we still all like to feel like we're offering something and that we're giving something to our club members and to the communities. The way that we can recognize those club members by giving them awards, by giving them achievements, those are the currency by which we can build successful clubs and to make people feel welcome. And I'm sure that Showtime Toastmasters is doing a lot of things to award and recognize the members, but we can always do more, and we can always make sure that we're doing things to keep our members, to make sure that our members are being recognized for the hard work that they put in. So does your club meet the standards? These are just the 6 moments of truth: first impressions, membership orientation, fellowship variety and communication, program planning and meeting organization, membership strength, and achievement recognition. Those are the things that build successful club meetings and that build relationships within your members. I will close with this. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Think about my story of how I walked into an unnamed club here in Arizona and they made a very poor impression on me. And I ended up leaving and going to another club because of it. Let's make sure by following the moments of truth that we are doing the things that make clubs successful and that provide value to our community and make people want to join and participate in our Toastmasters clubs. Madam Toastmaster.
Jared Fort is our first evaluator for the evening for Chad's speech tonight. Marilyn will be following him as Chad's second evaluator.
Thank you, Madam General Evaluator. The first thing, Chad, that I want to mention to you or focus on was your use of the stage. I want to focus on that because you indicated in our before the start of our speech, that that's something that you're not used to and this is new to you. So I want to commend you on that. You use this, from my perspective, you use the stage very well. All of your gestures were within the screen. And one thing I did like as well that I want to mention to you is as you've seen some of the other speakers using their virtual backgrounds, there are some cases where, just like now, where some of our gestures can wash out because of the background. And I did not notice that. You focus very well in the screen from my perspective that I did not see any of your gestures wash out. You're in the center of your screen and you use very good lighting as well. So again, I want to focus on that because that's something you indicated this is new to you. So I want to commend you again on that. Another thing that I mentioned is a very small matter, but I just thought, just for a future sake, when you do this again, that in the evaluation form it asks for a speech title. You technically did not give a speech title. Although we knew what your subject was, you didn't really give a speech title. You just said Moments of Truth, which I wrote as your speech title. But this has been a very good opportunity as well to do something in terms of the title, to draw attention and also to help you focus on what you wanted to present to us. I did like, although you did it later on in your speech, not at the beginning, but I did like how you did towards the end begin to use some of the examples to talk about and focus towards this particular club. I wish though you had did that early on in your presentation, that how we, because we are your main audience, how can this club take more advantage of Moments of Truth and use it to our advantage and to the advantage of our potential members as well. I will also want to bring to your attention some of the early things that we learned as Toastmasters, and that is being careful of your clarity and your use of your vocabulary. There are several occasions where you use double words. For example, when you talked about the first club you visited that you didn't like, you said it was not a good environment. Use another occasion when you were talking about one of your members would focus on events, especially on that fifth week, you mentioned that and events. And again, as I'm evaluating, I'm paying attention to those as well. And there's a couple other occasions we use double words. So I want to admonish you to be careful of that. Be careful when you tell your stories though, because you also create other things for us to focus on. For example, when you talked about why you didn't go to the other club, then you came back, then I'm wondering why you weren't a member of the club that you promoted. So be careful of that as well. And then other things I could share, but I will leave that to the second evaluator. Again, thank you again for speaking to us today.
Our second evaluator for the evening for Chad's speech is Ms. Marilyn Bennett. Marilyn, please give us your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Madam General Evaluator. And thank you, Jared, for sharing. So, all right, Chad, it has been a while since I've heard you give a speech. obviously. And this is one of the classic modules of Toastmasters. So I have a couple of things that I am going to look at as far as not only your presentation skills, but also the fact that you had mentioned that the virtual environment is not your favorite environment because you don't have any experience with it. So we're going to talk about a couple of things there. Now, I do want to say first off that you excelled in adding your personal stories to illustrate the moments of truth. And that can be so incredibly important, especially to these modules. I was also glad to hear you actually explain how those circumstances impacted not only the visitors or members of the club, but you as well, both positively and negatively. I also like that you included the fact that you actually left a club that didn't provide what you needed. It was like giving permission to people to use their own power to make sure that they get what they need from a club. And then, of course, your call to action reminded this club that there are things that we can do to keep that from happening to us. So I appreciated that very much. I am going to suggest a couple of things. One of them is surrounding the virtual environment. With virtual presentations, one of the biggest challenges for many people is remembering that the camera is your audience and keeping eye contact with that inanimate object is not something Toastmasters are accustomed to doing. When using notes, it's important to make sure that you place them so that your visual field of your notes is also in line with the camera. And that way you never lose contact with your audience. And the other thing is, I noticed that you still have the habit of person-to-person meetings of sweeping the room with your gaze. So for virtual environments, those are things that you do need to look at. The other thing is I would like to suggest that you review this video and take a look at the way that your double-handed gestures were utilized during the presentation. You used the steeple hands a lot, and you had a lot of the double hand bounces. And those can be overused very, very easily. And other than that, remember that sometimes it's okay to keep your hands down. Thank you so much, Chad. I appreciate it. And back to you, Madam General Evaluator.
Thank you very much, Marilyn and Jared, both for wonderful evaluations. Hopefully Chad can take a lot of that with him.